Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, located in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so very delighted that you are joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in this vitally important mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Audible, Castbox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have a wonderful show for you today. First up, James Stafford joining us from Prague in the Czech Republic. He is here to celebrate unbelievable underdogs and rebellious role models. And later in the show, we will be meeting KM Selvidge. She is celebrating Kloe's new start. This episode is brought to you by OnceUponADance.com. Ignite imagination with award-winning dance and movement books. Once Upon a Dance inspires young readers to twirl, leap, and dream with whimsy and wonder. Whether your child enjoys unicorns, bats, zombies, or cats, Once Upon a Dance has a dance-it-out story to get them moving. For more information about this 37 delightful books, please visit OnceUponADance.com or find them on your favorite social media platform. This episode is brought to you by the Logan series. 3 wonderful books written by Christine Ritchie McNamee. Logan and the Missing Masterpiece, Logan and the Lost Luggage, Logan and the Missing Jewels. Logan and the Lost Luggage is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read, and all 3 of these books feature Logan, an adorable Cocker Spaniel who travels the world with his magic phone. You and your kids are going to love traveling around the world with Logan, meeting animals from all over the world, visiting different countries, and learning how to get along with people from other countries and other cultures. It's a beautiful series of books. Our Reading with Your Kids certified great read panel loved Logan and the Last Luggage. We know you're going to love all 3 books. Check it out today. The Logan series by Christine Ritchie McNamee. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by 28 Days of Neon by Mayra Rosenberg. 12-year-old Neon Blue Green is queen of the cafeteria, co-captain of the cheerleading squad, and has the most amazing dog any 7th grader could ask for. Her only complaint in life is that her parents named her after the color of a sports energy drink. Until the morning she overhears them whispering and learns that she has only 28 days left to live. Neon needs a miracle, but how can she get one in only 28 days? Then it hits her. She'll do one good deed every day. This is a fascinating middle grade novel that you and your kids are going to love to read or co-read together. Get your copy today, 28 Days of Neon by Mayra Rosenberg. This episode is brought to you by Feliz Navidad. It's December of 2019, and Pittsburgh is covered in a terrible fog. Even worse, all of the reindeer get sick and they can't fly. Everyone in the North Pole is worried they'll have to cancel Christmas. But just when all hope seems lost, Santa's pet, Feliz Navidad, raises his paw to help. And while a dog is not quite a reindeer, Feliz is their last chance to save Christmas. This is a book about perseverance and grit. Feliz Navidad, the story of how Santa's dog saved Christmas. Get your copy today, Feliz Navidad, by Ari and Rhea Helper. Joining us right now from Prague in the Czech Republic. This is so amazing. We've had guests from literally all over the world, and it's we're living in such a wonderful time. Technology is amazing when it works and when it's used properly. Today, we're going to use it properly to speak to the author of Unbelievable Underdogs and Rebellious Role Models, sporting heroes who defied the odds and shocked the world. Wow, getting through that title, Defied the Odds. Please welcome to the show, James Stafford. Hey, James, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. And yeah, the full title is quite a mouthful, but the front cover, we use half of it. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, tell us about this. I'm guessing this is it's interesting that we're talking about this week because this is the 20th anniversary of the Boston Red Sox, very unlikely winning of the World Series. And I was part of the fandom that had suffered through 87 years. Well, I didn't suffer through all 87, but I suffered through a big chunk of those. And
Curse of the Bambino.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So the fact that they won in my lifetime was delightful. And what a great way to celebrate this anniversary.
Yeah, and doubly, the front, we have lots of athletes on the cover, and one of them is Jackie Robinson of the Dodgers, who obviously used to be Brooklyn Dodgers, but obviously this week the Dodgers look like they're going to clean up the World Series very quickly. So yeah, it's appropriate timing. But yeah, it's a book which celebrates sports from around the world. Lots of American sports in there, lots of stuff from basketball and NFL and NBA and all that. But yeah, it's a book that I wrote. The kind of book I would have loved as a child. I've always loved sport books. And I think sport books often get neglected and treated as kind of not great literature or not great books. And I think that's very unfair. And I wanted to write a book that would have inspired me as a youngster, because there's stories of either teams overcoming financial hardships or people overcoming sicknesses, illnesses, fleeing war zones, disabilities, everything you can think of. We've got like a story about that. And I wanted to write a book for young people, not just young people who love to read, but also make a book that was accessible maybe for reluctant readers. And the book came out in Europe in August. It comes out in America in November. But we've already had feedback from educators and parents saying boys in particular, young boys in particular, are kind of flying through the book because it's something a bit different and something that's kind of talks to them directly, which is exactly what I wanted to do when I wrote this.
Yeah. Is this a book of a collection of stories about these different sports stars?
Yeah, it's 28 chapters. I think it's 26 chapters. We've got a story about the history of the word underdog and about the tortoise and the hare and David and Goliath, all those classic stories to give people the context of where that language comes from. But we've got 26 chapters on either individuals or teams who have, again, either pulled off a shock one-off result or overcome a huge issue in their childhood or illnesses or whatever it is to reach the top and succeed. And we've got male, female sports. We've got Paralympians. We've got a kind of all sorts of different sports from around the world too. And we've also made a point, whatever your knowledge of a sport is, we've made sure that all the sports are explained. So if you're an American child and you've never watched cricket, you can enjoy the cricket chapter because we've explained what you need to know. And the same for youngsters in the UK reading about baseball who don't know what a runner batted in means, or all your crazy stats you guys have in America. We've made it accessible. So I also would say that you don't even have to be into sport, because these are stories of human triumph over the odds and very the kind of story we all respond to in our soul, whether we're into sport or not. So it's a book that sports people hopefully will love, but I think anyone can take something from it.
You know, I'm happy that you're getting feedback that reluctant readers love this book, because I think it's just the perfect book for those reluctant readers. I think it's part of that whole, I can read this chapter and get the whole story of this person in this chapter, and then I get to the next. So it's not, I think a lot of kids, a lot of adults, they sit down and they look, and there's 300-400 pages book, and it's like, yikes. Whereas if it's 300 pages, but there's 27 stories, well, that's doable.
Yeah. So I deliberately two things. The book's illustrated too, so every chapter is illustrated. So I think, again, for younger reluctant readers, that can be a big thing too, just to have those visuals and kind of just draws the eye straight away at the start of each chapter. But yeah, the chapters range. I think there's some that are like 4 pages, and I think the longest might be about 12 off the top of my head. So they're very manageable chunks. So what we're finding, actually, again, from the feedback I've had so far, very few people read it from beginning to end. They dive in, they go straight to their favorite sport. I love basketball. They go to the 2 basketball stories. Then their eye catches the American football story, and they go to that. And then by that point, if they've enjoyed those stories, they get a sense of what the book is, and they just start, going through it in whatever way they want. But I think that's important too. You're right, for reluctant readers. It's not, here's a 300-page book. It's, here's a book that you can read in 3, 4, 5-page chunks and have a complete story and an emotional reaction and whatever. So yeah, I was very keen to design a book that was accessible visually, in how you can approach it, and then in the content as well.
As you're talking, I was reflecting back about my own kind of journey with reading, and there were times in my life where I think I would have fallen into that reluctant reader category, and would check, how long is this chapter? Mm-hmm. And so I definitely relate to. And then there's other parts of my life where I sat down and read, the 1,200-page Stand by Stephen King, and loved it. So I think it's important to have books like Unbelievable Underdogs for kids who might get into that kind of reading funk. Don't want them to fall out of love with reading, but they're just having a hard time with it. So let's find these books, keep them reading, and eventually they're going to get back into the habit. Yeah,
and when I first came up with the idea for doing a book like this, to be honest, I was thinking of doing a bigger book on 1 or 2 of the characters in the book. And then I kind of thought a little bit about what you're saying, like, you've got to find an audience for that 1 or 2 topics, but also then is a reluctant reader going to read a 150-page book, as great as that story might be if you kind of fictionalize it or however you approach it. So yeah, it was very important to me to make it accessible in every way, but also for someone like, I know when I was a kid, if I had this kind of non-fiction book, if you're really enjoying it, you can still flow through it. One more chapter. So it's a very nice, you can get that hook in, it gets its hooks into you. So it kind of works if you just want to dip in, or if you're in the mood to read for an hour and you keep going. So I think it's a really nice format, and I'm really happy. Like I say, from what I've heard back, I sent a review copy out to one person, and I asked how the review's going, if they like the look of it. And he literally said, I don't know, my teenage son took it from me and I haven't seen it for a week. And that's not like him. So that was almost like the perfect review, that he couldn't get it himself. So yeah, it's a good start.
What's interesting is I mentioned that I'm a Boston sports fan. I grew up here in Boston. While I was suffering and the rest of the city was suffering with the Red Sox perennially losing, we had this other team, this basketball team, that was winning 13 out of 15 championships. And I loved going to the games, but I was able to go up and buy tickets the day of a Game 7 series final. And to think that would happen now is unthinkable. But, it's so everybody in Boston loved the Red Sox and loved the Patriots, 2 losing teams. And you really kind of ignored the Celtics, who are winning championship after championship. Why do we love underdogs so much?
I think I've always been fascinated by them, and I'm always asking that question. I think we can always relate something in our own lives to a sporting team. There's something about sport where we see a story on a screen or whatever, on the TV or on the field, and we can relate to that challenge. And it might be that you have come from a background, you don't have much money, and you want to get a great career and go to a great college and you can't afford it. Or it might be you have a bad leg or a bad knee and you can't do as well at sport unless you train differently. We can all find these things in our life, in our careers, in our family, personal lives, that are difficult to overcome. And often sport encapsulates that. When you see an athlete overcome some kind of disadvantage, there's something about it that warms the heart. And in sport, you might get that with, in your case, the New York Yankees, with all this money and unlimited paychecks, and a smaller team, obviously the famous Oakland A Moneyball thing. We can find those kind of parallels, and it's why sport makes such great movies. In fact, the story that inspired this, and my favorite sports person of all time is the Cinderella Man, James J. Braddock, the boxer that Russell Crowe played in the 1930s, who overcame poverty and injury to win the world title. And I think we can relate to those stories as people. And that's, again, another thing I wanted to do with the book. A lot of children or young teenagers or people reading this book will have their own struggles in life. It might be at family, it might be at school, it might not be sport, but it could be sport. And I think there's something in these stories that says to you, look, life can be really, really tough. And, you know, there's hope there. There's whether it's thinking about approaching your challenge differently or trying to get support or pushing yourself further than you think you can. And, you know, yes, life isn't always a fairy tale, but I think we can all take something from these underdog stories. And I think that's the thing that hits us, is there's something in it. We see an underdog and we see a little bit of ourselves in it in some way. And it inspires us to support them and then to maybe improve ourselves in some way, or strive to at least.
Yeah. What's the, not unusual, but least known here in the States and maybe UK sport that you cover in the book?
Well, yeah, I guess one of the ones that's the most unusual in terms of, for Americans might be the Japanese rugby team. So traditionally, Japan have played rugby for a long time, the best part of 100 years, but traditionally they're a very small nation physically, and they used to struggle. They didn't have enough teams or money, and they were very small. So they became technically very good, but they couldn't compete on a physical level with these giants from South Africa, New Zealand, England, etc. And in 2015, they went into the World Cup, which is every 4 years. And I think their record in the World Cup since 1991 was 1 win from 26 or 27 games, you know, nothing. And that was against a very weak team, and they'd never won a major game. And they were playing South Africa, who at the time were 2 times World Cup winners, huge team. And what people didn't realize is for several years, Japan had targeted this game, and they'd improved slowly, kind of under the radar. Very, very high fitness level, very dedicated fitness program. And they targeted this game. And I cannot explain to you enough how unlikely people even targeting that game, how silly that sounded. And not only did they win that game and shock the rugby world, and I think in a one-off game, it's probably the biggest upset in team sports in terms of like a one-off match. They did it with style, with intelligence. And at the very end of the game, they were offered what you guys call a tie. They could have kicked an easy kick and taken a tie, taken a draw. And people would have been amazed, but they didn't. They declined it and went for the extra points to score, to try and win it. And the coaches were fuming. It was one of the most greatest moments of sport in theatre, and they did it. And so it's not just an incredible underdog story where they worked for years. When it came down to it and they could have settled for something pretty good, they still had the guts to go for it. And I think when you read that story about how they did that, and again, overcoming physical size with fitness and intelligence and bravery, it's one of the most inspiring stories I've ever seen. And even now, when I watch the clips of that, I get goosebumps and you know, you kind of shivers. It's just one of those great moments in sport. Yeah.
I love the idea of introducing kids to sports from around the world. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great thing that we can do with our kids as a family. Obviously, you can love your favorite local teams and the sports that you're playing, but to reach out and to find out what's other people in different countries are passionate about. I used to love watching a TV show Saturday nights. We'd watch it the only night that we'd watch TV while we ate. And we'd always have hot dogs and beans. Mm-hmm. But it was called Wild World of Sports. Uh-huh. And it was just an hour-long show and 15 minutes on this sport that you might know and 15 minutes here on a sport from another country that you'll never see in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what was quite fun, actually, was in writing this book, because I knew it would get an American release. As I said, I had to make sure that there's something in each chapter that explains every sport, so wherever you're coming from, you understand it. And I've always been a huge fan of American sports, so I've grown up with them as well. And what's really interesting to me is America often has this closed view, if I can say this. So you'll get these lists, and it'll be the 50 greatest sporting moments ever. And 48 of them will be American sporting moments. And they're amazing sporting moments, but there's a whole world of sporting moments out there. Whereas in the UK, maybe, when the newspaper does the top 50 sporting moments, you'll have a lot of UK ones, but it will be more global. So one of the other things I'm hoping is, as you say, a lot of American children maybe will read about sports they've never read about before. And even if they don't go and follow them, but they might look them up on YouTube, but they'll just come across a story they won't find in their usual news channels or sports channels that they'll really find inspiring. So yeah, it's been fun trying to pick that balance of which sports to pick. And that was one of the toughest things, actually, was which stories to include, which to leave out. But I've tried to strike that balance. So even if you're a crazy sports fan from America and you don't know a lot of these sports, that you'll find the stories thrilling.
Yeah. You mentioned that you highlight and showcase some Paralympians.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about one of those?
Yeah, we've got Kathleen Thomas, which is one of the most incredible stories. She was a wheelchair racer, but she was in an orphanage in Soviet Union, and was adopted by an American diplomat who came across her in such terrible conditions and brought her to the US. And she Kathleen in Soviet Union didn't even have a wheelchair, was basically in the most inhumane conditions. And her mother supported her and got her into sports and had to fight legal battles to get her to be able to do sport in high school because there weren't the facilities, and overcame all these incredible legal difficulties and obviously peer pressure and stuff. And basically went on to become probably one of the greatest Paralympians of all times, with multiple gold medals in all sorts of events and distances. But that's one of those incredible stories of not just overcoming, especially in the early days of the Paralympics, not just overcoming her own personal difficulties, but just not coming to America and then not being the sporting facilities that we have now, thankfully, often for Paralympians. So there's a great thing where not as someone made their own way, they've helped pave the way for others that follow them. So what she's done and what her mother has done has helped change things for people that have come after them. So that's one of the most incredible stories from the book.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite of the stories?
Yeah, my favorite is I know it's not necessarily I'm not a sport necessarily too, but the boxing story of James J. Braddock, the American boxer from the 30s, which is obviously very well known through movies like Cinderella Man. There's something in that about where, and this is a classic example of what underdogs speak to people. You had the Great Depression in America where people were living in shanty towns, all the economy had collapsed, people had lost everything. And you had this very humble, very honest fighter who, couldn't even afford to feed his children at one point, had a broken up hand. By the era of the time, he was in his late 20s, which was old for the time in boxing. And he lost everything. And not only did he rebuild it, but he did it. He kind of became a symbol for the people who lost everything in America. And he made this incredible run to the world title after retiring. And he'd been on welfare, which at the time he was very embarrassed to be on welfare because he paid his welfare back because he wanted to give back to the country that supported him. And it's just an incredible story of this man having all this bad fortune, then taking every little bit of luck he had to get a chance, got another chance. But when you read about what he meant to the American people at that time, people going to listen to thousands of people gathering just to listen to the radio broadcast because he became a symbol of hope, that there is a way to get back and back on your feet. So that's a story that's always inspired me personally, and actually was the inspiration for the book. It was the first chapter I wrote. And I think it's just, and also it's a great bit of social history. So the other thing I've done in this book is we have lots of different eras. So say James J. Braddock is the 1930s, 1920s. So for young people who might not have read much about sport in that era, you get a glimpse of American society at the time, a little bit about the Great Depression. So I think it's nice to sometimes as well, these kind of sport's a great way to teach younger people about history as well, because you can tie that into the world these people lived in. And again, obviously, in some of the other stories here, we've got stories about athletes overcoming racism at certain times in certain parts of the world, and you get a glimpse into how societies worked in different eras. So I think it's a good book as well if you've got a young person that you want them to learn a bit more about a different era. This could be a little bit of a gateway as well.
Yeah. Just imagine a middle grade reader today who has access to this little box that carry around in their pocket that gives them access to videos from all over the world, and they can watch a game or sport over and over and over and over again. And helping them realize that, about 40 years ago, if you wanted to watch you couldn't watch a boxing match. You had to listen to it on the radio.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. And I've done a lot of writing in other books on the history of sport. And I mean, I was writing about something recently in the 1880s, 90s when Wales were playing rugby where I'm from. And people would, they would send out pigeons at like various points during the game with the match score on to, get people to score to people, and obviously telegrams. And people used to sit around someone with a telegram and they would read out a boxing match by a telegram notes, or it's incredible. Whereas now, like, I wake up in the morning because of the time zone, and that might be the first thing I do is watch the highlights from the World Series a few hours before, and it's there on my phone at the breakfast table,
Yeah.
And as you said years ago, you just would have maybe got a newspaper report a few days later if you wanted to follow that on the other side of the world.
It is amazing. 26 stories.
26 stories, I think. Yeah.
26 stories. There's a lot that you left out, I'm sure. How did you decide which ones to keep and which ones not to share?
Yeah, it was really tough. I think at one point I probably drew up a spreadsheet with, I've got, 3 American football stories and 2 basketball, and kind of trying not to go too many in sort of, you obviously want to have the most popular sports represented. And then I was also like, I want to have a cricket story because I'm a big cricket fan and I'm from the UK where cricket's huge, but there's a great Indian cricket story. So I wanted to have some more people from Asia, people from America, people from Europe, also trying to get that. I wanted to have as much of a balance as I could between female athletes as well as male athletes. And so it was, and then I wanted to make sure I had at least sort of off the top of my head, 9 or 10 team stories as well as individual stories. So it was kind of like looking at this spreadsheet with like, I've got 3 of these and 2 of these and making sure I could get as diverse range of stories and people and countries in, because I think that just gives that richness to, as you say, there's not going to be almost any young people that are going to know all these people or know all these countries and sports. So I think it's a great, almost like an encyclopedia of world sport as well, and a nice way to explore sports you might not know much about and you might even fall in love with.
Yeah. Well, the neat thing about that spreadsheet and having to make tough choices is, that volume 2 could come out very easy. Any plans?
Yeah.
Coming up with volume?
Well, I'd love to. I mean, there's like you said, I would certainly be halfway there with the content if they did, because they were the ones I had to cut. Because it's one of those books where if it's a success, and obviously, hopefully it is. Yeah, there's certainly more where that came from. As I said, it's always really tough. You think non-fiction is always tougher than you think it is to write, because it's just you do as much research as you do writing, there's a lot of stuff that I had to cut very reluctantly. So if it's a success, I'd love to do another one.
Well, that's really, really cool. I want to tell you, I don't know if you're aware of a very inspiring father-son team here in the United States. They would run the Boston Marathon. The Hoyts. And
I know the name. Yeah.
Yeah. The son was, had a disability and was in a wheelchair, and the dad would push him, on the Boston Marathon every year. Very inspiring story. So, perhaps that could be in volume 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Well, definitely. And we've got a bit of Boston Marathon in there actually, because we've got the story of, the Catherine Switzer and Bobby Gibb, the first women who ran the Boston Marathon. So, that's an incredible story too. Again, if you want to talk about social history to young people, showing them that, only a few decades ago, women who tried to run the Boston Marathon were physically grabbed and removed from, and they literally, even in the 60s and 70s, even after women had run marathons, you had people saying like, women's bodies cannot do it and their wombs will damage and they will die, or they will, that women weren't physiologically capable. And this was only 40, 50 years ago. So I think that's something a young person who doesn't know those stories would be both horrified and fascinated to find how much attitudes have changed in time, in those relatively short space of time.
Yeah. Typically we think about, 1 or 2 conversations a family can have when they're reading a book. 26, 27, 28 conversations can come from reading believable underdogs and rebellious role models. good on you for creating this book and bringing it into the world. Where can we go to find out more about it and find out more about you?
Well, my website is JP, that's James Paul, jpstafford.com. Most of my social handles are at JP Stafford, so it's pretty much universal. And if you go to jpstafford.com, you can see all my other books and my bio and stuff. And then Unbelievable Underdogs comes out in the US, I think, on the 7th of November, and it's going to be in all the online bookstores and hopefully into the physical ones shortly as well. But yeah, out on the 7th of November.
We've had a wonderful time speaking to the author of Unbelievable Underdogs and Rebellious Role Models. Our guest has been James Stafford. James, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by the books by Charmaine Perry Knights. Charmaine is a TEDx speaker, award-winning facilitator, world traveler, and author. Serving military families through quality literature is her goal and her passion. Her books are absolutely amazing. They are just full of great messages. Books like I'll Find My Way, and that's okay. I Move a Lot, and that's okay. And It's Cool to Be Kind. Such great books that you and your kids will absolutely adore. These books deserve to be in your family library. Get them today. The books by Charmaine Perry Knights. They're available today at Amazon. Are you looking for the perfect gift for a young reader? Woofy and the Dinosaur Dig Adventure, the second book in the Woofy series, is an exciting choice that fosters creativity, friendship, and teamwork. Join Woofy, a small gray stuffed dog, on his thrilling quest to help his friends excavate a T-Rex in the mountains. Young readers will enjoy his humorous adventures and admire his skills as a pup paleontologist, all set in a beautifully illustrated lyrical story. Authored by Helen Rogenson, retired award-winning teacher honored with the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. This book encourages lifelong learning while supporting charities for animal rescues and children in need. Don't miss out. Visit us at unpackyourownhappy.com and connect with us on Instagram at unpackyourownhappy. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back, written by Stephen Joseph and illustrated by Andy Case. In this third installment of the Snoodles series, the Zoodles are determined to have their revenge. With the help of a grimy millionaire who's fallen on hard times, they intend to poison the Earth's water supply and turn everyone into willy-nillys and dilly-dallies. Can Brianna and Ricky save the Earth again? Will the outcast kids on the other side of the track rise to the challenge and help save the world? You can find out with Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back. Hey, my friend, Jed here. We all know that for kids to develop a lifelong passion for reading, they need to get engaged with books that spark their imaginations and interest. Wouldn't it be great if they also got interested in history and geography at the same time? That's where the great fantasy book series that kids simply can't put down, The Adventures of Jimmy and Andrew, come in. A 9-year-old boy and his 3,300-year-old telepathic dog, who is rescued from the shelter, set off for adventures around the world with Jimmy's archaeologist parents. The first book in the series, American Stonehenge, has more than 300 positive reviews. To learn more, please visit jimmyandandrew.com. That's jimmyandandrew.com. Join us right now from Oakland in the beautiful state of California. Our guest is here today. Celebrate her new children's book. It's called Kloe's New Start. Please welcome to the show, KM Selvidge. Hey, Catherine, how are you?
I am so excited to be here with you this morning, Jed. Thank you.
You are very welcome. I'm excited to learn about Kloe and this new start.
Well, I have wanted to write about my relationship with my brother and how mental illness can set the tone in an entire family for about 30 plus years now. So it's a story of a young girl overcoming the odds, of growing up in a dynamic, complex family situation.
You know, we've talked a lot about mental illness here on the show, and uh, we don't often, and I don't think we talk enough in any form about how mental illness affects family members. Can you share a little bit about that?
I can, yes. I mean, my sibling, this story is based on my, like semi-autobiographical because it's about growing up with an older sibling. And as you know, probably from certain things with friends or maybe yourself, having the first child set the tone for the whole family it's really hard. I mean, their attention is completely overwhelmed by him and his needs and, what to do. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, people did not know what to do. I mean, today people still, there's a stigma still attached, but I think that we're getting better at least talking about it. And, with my particular brother, the story is a little toned down because I want it to be friendly and, kind of talk about harshness and realities, but in a more lighter side by using animals, which are a little more user friendly. But it can be really difficult because you're trying to find your place at home and you're trying to find where do you fit in at school. And, there's judgment everywhere. It's very difficult.
I'm sure it is. I grew up with a parent who suffered from mental illness, and we didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things where this family member was hospitalized for 2 years, would come home on the weekends, and it's like, you're sick during the week and then you can come home on the week. I don't get this, but we never, it was never talked about. And anytime questions were brought up, it was quiet, go on your day. And I'm sure that's a lot of what you experienced too.
Oh, you just did not talk about problems. I had older parents as well. And you just did not talk about those kind of problems at all. It's just, he's going through stages. He'll be fine. And, it's not true. And I also think they had a really hard time coming to terms with the fact that you have a child that is not normal. It's causing a lot of problems. And, it's better to think of them as going through phases than it is as to what the real problem is.
Now, are you able to share with us what kind of issues your brother had?
He has a variety of things. He had like ADHD, and he had behavioral problems and a little bit of psychopathy. There was a little bit of, aggressiveness and slight violence in him as well. And, personality disorder. So it's he had a lot of things going on at once. And it made for a very difficult maneuvering of like, how do you deal with this person?
Right.
How do you live with this person?
Right. Yeah. I think part of the reason, what makes it especially difficult, and maybe it's the reason, we didn't talk about these things back in the day, is because when I tore my quad tendons back in February 23, it was very easy. The surgeon came in, saw me, felt my legs, said, well, your quads aren't where they're supposed to be. I'm going to have to go in there and roll them down to reattach them. And then we can do this. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. Something's broken. We're going to fix it.
Right.
With mental illness, there's really no clear, and even today with the fact that we know so much more than we did, there's no very clear answer of, this is the problem and we can deal with this problem, give this person help with X, Y, and Z. A lot of times, it's, we're going to try things and we're going to, I don't mean to sound flippant, but it's almost as if they're like, let's throw something against the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. I mean, and also the person has to want to be helped.
This is true. And I think that's one of the things that is most frustrating with, family members is that it's like, you have this help. Why aren't you taking it? And, oftentimes their answer will be, well, because it doesn't make me feel like me. And it's hard to go back with, yeah, but yeah, ruining everybody else's.
Yeah. Exactly. That's very true. And it becomes also to the point of what they feel about themselves. Like, unfortunately, my sibling did not think he was sick. He just didn't, so why should I have to do that? If, this is just who I am, and if your parents are kind of like overwhelmed and don't know what's happening, and there really isn't a lot of things that 30, 40 years ago for people to turn, what do you do with the situation?
Right. So how are we talking about this very complex, very difficult, somewhat controversial, people might say, issue in a children's book?
Well, we're bringing up what it's like to grow up with. This is the first book. I want to do a series of books that will, kind of dive into what it's like to a little more in the family aspect and going to school. And, I think that I'm trying to do it in a more softer, gentler way, which is one of the reasons why I used animals, because they're user friendly, and also the fact that an animal is no specific race, creed, or gender. It could be anybody. And that's what I also wanted. Mental illness does not discriminate. It will choose whoever it chooses in whatever family. Mm-hmm. And I really hope that I'm choosing to do a meaningful narrative through exploring human kindness and self-trust and believing in yourself, even when situations are difficult and you don't know what's going on and you don't know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. So in this story, is Kloe the character that is suffering?
Yes. Kloe would be my kind of alter ego kind of person. Yes.
Okay. And someone in her family is not acting as they should.
Right. Her sibling.
Yeah. Okay. What kind of things is Kloe's sibling doing?
Well, he's definitely acting out in school, and he's with his ADHD issues, which will come up later in some different stories. He's being held back from school. I mean, from going to, the next grade. And even though they're like 3 or 4 years apart in age, he's being held back. So she's going to a new school, and guess what? He's going to be there too, and everybody knows who he is. And therefore they're like, oh God, it's that family. It's that person. She's related to him. Therefore you are just like him.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have very vivid memories of kids in our elementary schools who were having trouble, and it's like, oh, well, if that person's having trouble, then the sisters and the brothers must also. We have to watch out for them.
Exactly. Now, that family.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious. You've mentioned psychopathy that your brother dealt with and violence, but you also brought up ADHD. Have you received or heard any pushback from folks who would say, well, ADHD, it's not a mental illness, it's just what we call neurodiverse. That person not mentally ill is neurodiverse.
I think with me mentioning he has ADHD, it's just saying this is also an issue that he has to deal with. I don't really necessarily relate that to his mental illness, more so in that this is also another issue that makes things difficult for him. It's not a normal way for him to think and to, be who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how does Kloe have a new start? Who is there to help her?
So for me, my dad was great. Although he worked a lot, but he was he was an engineer. So he's one of those people who had to fix problems. And this was a problem he could not fix, unfortunately for him. So Sir Petey there is the good character and the voice of reason who reminds me of my father. let's think about the situation. Let's walk through this and see what happens. And she has some good friends who have known her, which is like Terry the turkey and Ginger the goat, who've gone to grade school with her. So they know her and they know all of these issues and have seen it firsthand. So they're kind of like you can do this. Don't worry about it. Be who you are. They're helping her to find her own resilience.
Mm-hmm. That's so important, to have friends and to have that support. I'm imagining a lot of kids in your situation, in Kloe's situation, feel really isolated.
Yes, you do. You really do. You feel like, you also feel like, what's wrong with me? Like maybe this is my problem. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We
love asking authors what kind of conversations families can have as they're experiencing a children's book. I'm imagining there are a lot of conversations that families can get involved in as they're reading Kloe's New Start.
Yes. I mean, I think the biggest thing for parents is to listen and recognize what's going on with their kids. If there's behavioral problems, if things are going well, how are the children interacting with each other and on a social level in school and with family members? I think it's really important to not say, it's probably just growing up, but really take the time to, check through what is happening with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important.
Yeah. So obviously this would be a great book for a family that is experiencing mental illness. But I think it can be a wonderful window into somebody else's life. So if a kid, a family that's
Yes.
not experiencing these issues would
Right.
benefit a lot. How do you think those families can benefit from the book?
Well, I think, a lot of times growing up with siblings, you do have some rivalries. You do have some minor fighting issues that you outgrow, which you don't necessarily do with a mental ill sibling. But I think that, you go to school and you have to learn to not be in the shadow of that sibling, whether they're really good or whether they're really bad. You are you. And, people can be bullying and people can be prejudging. And I really think that this will help them believe that, believe in who you are, pick good people to be friends, find, humankind people. And, just trust yourself, which is really hard, I think, when you're younger. And even as an adult, it's hard.
Yeah.
Especially when you're younger and you're worrying about, what do other people think of me, which is so high school and elementary school and pre-teen years. You're always worrying about everything.
Yeah. Tell me, you mentioned that this is a book that you wanted to write for 30 years. What was holding you back?
Oh gosh. Well, talking about it, bringing it out in the open. I mean, people are not really excited to talk about mental illness for sure. I mean, even today, when you hear something's happening with horrible school shootings, that something has been happening in that house for a long time. And either the parents are kind of part of that issue or they are just avoiding what's happening with that kid and hoping they just grow out of it and then leave. I think that finally we're at that time where there's more help for people. There's so much more support. I mean, there's therapy. People talk about going to therapy, which 30, 40 years ago, you kept that under the rug. No one's going to talk about that. People are much more open about having support groups. I know Facebook has great sibling support groups. There's, nonprofit organizations like NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness, that just really helps individuals as well as families. So, I think it's time. Mm-hmm. I hope, that we keep moving forward.
Yeah. I'm curious, what reaction have you received from your sibling and from the rest of your family?
My sibling he's not overly aware of a lot of things. He doesn't really pay attention to it.
Okay.
And unfortunately my parents are both gone.
Okay.
So they're not around to to see and read the story for themselves and kind of take it in and see what they really truly have felt and thought all those years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We should tell people where they can go to find out more about Kloe's New Start, find out more about you, and also remind people of that organization that offers support.
Yes. Well, that's NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness, and they have chapters in every state. And you can go to Amazon and look up KM Selvidge, Kloe's New Start, or you could go to my website, which is kmselvidge.com. And, I hope you enjoy and love the story. I'm going to continue doing more stories on that.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Kloe's New Start. It's a powerful and important new children's book from our guest, KM Selvidge. KM, Catherine, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are really excited. The Reading with Your Kids podcast family is growing. In December, we are going to be launching a brand new podcast featuring interviews with authors from Connecticut of books for adults, for kids, for everyone. Of course, we have our Guardians of the Game podcast. If you are a D&D fans, Dungeons and Dragons fans, you absolutely want to check it out. And coming in 2025, Real Magic is coming in. Here to give us a little musical preview is my buddy Chris Hardy.
Kindness is quite magical, and respect is magical too. When you travel as much as Jed does, the magic comes right through. But he's not alone in his quest, he's got some helpers in his crew. 3 dogs that help him stage his show and bring it right to you. Real Magic Podcast, it's so much fun in many ways. Real Magic Podcast, tune in and you'll be amazed. Leads the charge as a magician and a bit of a clown. Calvin is a goofy pit bull who never seems to be down. Augie is a grumpy old beagle, or is he really a basset hound? And Daisy is a border collie wiener dog that knows her way around. Real Magic Podcast, it's so much fun in many ways. Real Magic Podcast, tune in and you'll be amazed. Real Magic Podcast, it's so much fun in many ways. Real Magic Podcast, tune in and you'll be amazed.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids. Will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, please be sure to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedly Magic on Twitter. Please be sure to visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, we'd love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can check on our blog, visit our Reading With Your Kids Certified Great Read Wall of Fame, and use the contact button at the top of the page to let us know what you love about the show, let us know what we could be doing better, and let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode out of Reading With Your Kids. And if you're an author, absolutely you want to check out the author's click here button at the top of the page to find out how you can be a guest here on Reading With Your Kids. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our amazing guests. James Stafford. Please be sure to check out Unbelievable Underdogs and Rebellious Role Models. And we also want to thank KM Selvidge. Please be sure to check out Kloe's New Start. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Rayling Tang. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she shows me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.